Hello and welcome back to part two of our Hibs Observer post-match debrief with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Craig Nisbet again, to just review the 3-1 victory over Aberdeen at Pittodrie on Saturday. We were part one on Monday evening there, where we broke down some of the stats behind the game, broke down the goals in detail. So now we're going to take an even more sort of in-depth, even more granular look at how the game panned out, looking at Hibs' tactics, Aberdeen's tactics, and everything in between. Craig, again, thank you for joining us. How are we getting on? We all good?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm looking forward to sort of doing a bit more of a wee deep dive into the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a word, as always, for our sponsors, folks. Good Vibes Giveaways. They are proud to sponsor the Hibs Observer and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change weekly, include tech and gadgets, days out, tax-free cash, and even Oasis tickets. So get involved at www.goodvibesgiveaways.com for your chance to win some of those brilliant prizes. So here we go. Let's get stuck back into Saturday's game. We're just going to change our layout a wee bit here, folks. Just give me a wee second to... where are we? Right. Here we go. A lot of buttons for me to press at the moment. It's overwhelming me. No, here we go. So, Craig, you just wanted to have a look, first of all, at the teams, how the teams, how they set up, the shapes in and out of possession. What can you tell us about how that panned out on Saturday?
Yeah, so I mean, Hibs we've seen for a while are setting up with a sort of back three, four across the middle, so no Triantis, and then we've kind of tweaked the front a little bit. Sometimes it's Kurevich and with maybe Johan in a bit more of a free role and Hoylett sort of maybe more to the right and picking up that number 10 position. But Saturday was pretty clear. It was Josh Campbell in at that 10 position and Martin Boyle sort of right forward and Ellie Ewan left forward. So something quite different, but obviously worked really well and was really effective in the game. And against Aberdeen, obviously they're quite stringent in their 4-2-3-1 sort of setup. And they obviously really like to push their fullbacks high. And I think, and especially, we've seen the damage Nicky Devlin's done this season, but Mackenzie as well out of possession. And obviously Kiskinen on the far left-hand side as well. So it was a really interesting game to go into because I kind of felt that there was one, when you play against Aberdeen or you play in that setup that Hibs play, there's sort of one quite open flaw really in the system, the way we play. And I sort of thought Aberdeen exploited that quite well in the sort of opening part of the game.
Yeah, aye, it's just, you're right, you're saying it was the kind of opening stages of the game almost where Aberdeen had most of their kind of joy. Let's just bring this up. So is this what you're talking about here?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously on the left hand side, you can see I've kind of highlighted Clarkson there, the number 10, and we've got Mackenzie going forward on that left hand side and Kiskinen as well. And basically, when there was any kind of transition, Aberdeen really looked to attack down that area of play. And this example here, not long before the goal, you can see Shinnie sort of plays the ball forward up into the forward area. I think Aberdeen get like a quick combination and then sort of release Kiskinen in behind, I think, in the next clip. And that they get, I think, a little bounce with Sockler and McGrath there, and then you can see Kiskinen on that far side. And you can see just with that setup, because of Chris Cadden's positioning, you can see Nicky Cadden on the other side, and that's our three midfielders there, Triantis and Campbell sort of all taking out the game with Ellie and Martin just up front there. And then obviously, this position here, you don't want to see your back three like this at any point in any game. And you can see there that it's Kiskinen just on that left-hand side, just about to break forward into that area. And I'm pretty sure this is the chance that eventually gets pulled back, and I think Rocky makes a really, really good block.
Yeah.
But Aberdeen did that a few times to us. That's obviously where we discussed last night. Like, that's where the goal came from, kind of down that side. Although it was pretty fortuitous, it was a long ball that Clarkson picked up and they exploited it. But that is sort of one of the big problems and one of the issues playing with that 3-4-1-2, and it's certainly the way Hibs like to play, by really emphasising both fullbacks, both wing backs, being involved. We obviously seen for Nicky Cadden's goal that, Chris Cadden's overlapping one side, overlapping Joe Newell, who knocked it into Boyle, and Boyle clips it, and it's Nicky Cadden that delivers. So there becomes a really big emphasis on that midfield too, sitters with Triantis and Newell, in terms of trying to stop those counter attacks. But I sort of felt we kind of struggled a little bit with that, especially in the first half.
Yeah, is this something you'd maybe expect teams to try and do moving forward? Because obviously it's still been kind of, Hibs playing in this shape still relatively new. There's maybe other teams been trying to, suss out how to exploit it. So I mean, would you be surprised if teams didn't try and target that going forward?
No, I mean, if you were coming up against Hibs, I think that's the areas you'd be looking to get into. Just those big sort of open spots in behind the wing backs. And especially if you can get organised and you sit in a sort of like a low block or low to mid block, and you're able to pinch the ball back. I think O'Hora and Iredale don't look super comfortable defending out into those sort of wide areas. Obviously, we've seen O'Hora go off and Lewis Miller come on, and I actually think that helped a little bit in the second half, because Miller, being a right back or a right wing back, is actually really comfortable with the ball getting put in behind him and running back and defending in that style. Whereas for O'Hora, I don't think that's something he looks super comfortable with. The same with Iredale on the other side. They are growing into the team a lot more, and it might be something that, if we stick with this shape and the same setup, that 3-4 weeks time they do look more comfortable. But I think against any pace in those areas, that's where I would look to hurt. And again, with Aberdeen, they sort of deployed Clarkson as a number 10, but he sort of came over to the left hand side a lot more, and that's quite common, just the number 10 trying to overload one part of the pitch, which kind of then forces the midfield into a bit of a decision. I don't know if you can go back onto my tactics board. I can quickly show you just something how it can look. So if we take it here, like, let's just say this is McKenzie on that ball in this position here, Kiskinen up there. The striker was it Sockler in the first half? He was pretty good at sort of trying to play in sort of behind, kind of in between Rocky and O'Hora in that position there. As we said, Kiskinen quite like to sort of hug the touchline a little bit and stay in this area into there. Now, what Clarkson was then doing was almost coming into a position like this. Now, at that point, with our midfield three, you've got Triantis, you've got Newell, and you've got Campbell. So it kind of made more sense for Campbell to kind of come back and try and close that bit of possession down. But then Shinnie and Nielsen were sort of sitting in these positions here. And what was quite often happening was, when we were putting pressure, Newell and Triantis were a lot deeper, and Aberdeen were able to then work the ball into a position like this. Newell and Triantis a lot deeper, so then they're starting to come out, and then it started to create little pockets of space in behind. So actually what started to happen was Boyle, in his credit, to be fair, in the first half, started to drop back into this wider position to allow Campbell to stay in, and then so that Triantis could almost become like a deeper number 6, and then Newell could then apply a bit of pressure to Nielsen in those areas there to kind of stop them playing, because they were overloading one side and then they were just popping it in the middle, and they had so much then space to exploit. And I actually don't think they did it very well. But certainly, like, the mechanics were there to sort of hurt us in that part of the pitch.
So then it's a case of Hibs then finding sort of solutions to problems in game then, really.
Yeah, and one thing they did try and find, and we saw in like last night's episode, like, Newell's position was quite high, and I would imagine in the second half when Kwon came on, his position was also quite high, and we'll probably touch on that later on with some of the images, and the fact that, in that moment you sort of almost need to flip your midfield to say, right, Campbell, you maybe need to drop in, Newell push up, Triantis, you're now the deepest lying player, and what you have to do is just sort of pass people on. So if Clarkson has pulled into this area and here, then it's just a case of everybody trying to shuffle along. And, if the ball's then worked out to the other side, that people just keep moving into these different positions. Where it's difficult, I suppose, with the back three as well, is there's times, and I've seen it during the game a lot, where, a player would maybe run off, maybe Newell or Triantis, and they're sort of almost like passing them on to the back three, but they're obviously quite occupied. If Aberdeen move their three players like Sockler, McGrath and Kiskinen in the middle, they're all taken. So you sort of have to follow and track your runner a little bit in those moments. And then, like what happened in the second half, a little bit, Triantis started to fall too deep, and Miller was often trying to push him out and say, like, get away from this area. Like, it was too congested. So listen, it's not easy. And we know Aberdeen are a very good side. So I imagine that was something they were trying to exploit. They did it, but they just weren't able to really capitalise on it. And I do think that in-game Hibs managed to adapt by, as I said, dropping Martin Boyle out wide and allowing Josh Campbell to be a bit more present in the middle of the pitch.
Yeah, aye, absolutely. Right, let's have a wee look back to clips.
Yep.
They take the tactics board. There it goes. There it's away. And we come again. So where did we get to?
So this is just a sort of another example, just like what we were discussing there. You can see this is kind of what it looked like in the game. So this is Clarkson in this position here, and you can see this is Boyle drop back in. You've got Triantis and Campbell and Newell across there, and you can actually see O'Hora at that point is kind of getting attracted out to Kiskinen. You can see Rocky's picking up Sockler, McGrath just picked up in between Nicky Cadden and Iredale in that part of the pitch. So this was quite often what Aberdeen were doing, especially in the first part of the game. And I think if you go on in the next part of the clip, they work the ball back, and then I just wanted to highlight, like, there's our back five with the purple line going through them and the purple circles around them. Triantis is coming out there just a wee bit slowly. He's kind of making up that. And so you can see what we just discussed. Like, there's Newell and Campbell sort of like kind of flip the triangle a little bit in terms of like that. What we were sort of two holding midfielders, one attacking. We've kind of went to one holding, two attacking to apply a little bit more pressure. But it's all a bit sort of last minute in this clip. And as the ball moves across to Shinnie, you can see now when the game's paused here that Campbell's just pressed Nielsen, Boyle's still out there, sort of looking at Kiskinen. We've got Clarkson in the middle, and the gap between Newell and Triantis, you can see, is massive. Ellie's just come back into the picture, but Shinnie's able to drive forward here and hit that sort of split pass, which we speak about a lot, in behind. And I think McGrath would have been offside here, I think. But again, it's very close positionally. So it was just something that Aberdeen did, and they did it very well in the opening part of the game. It sort of faded away from them a little bit. I think the goals sort of rattled them a little bit. I couldn't understand why they just didn't keep doing what they were doing down that side. Like, Hibs did try and change it and adapt it, but you can see there it's not that solution. Having Martin Boyle there isn't ideal, because then if you win the ball back, if you thump it clear here, Aberdeen are getting it back and it's another wave of attack. So it's something to keep an eye out for, and it's certainly something that I would imagine other teams would look to do against us.
Yeah, so kind of signs of this system still having sort of, maybe flaws and kinks ironed out of it, really.
Yeah, and I think we've said on the show before, any system, there's always pros and cons, and I do think this is the best system for us to play at the minute. However, to a certain extent, it is square pegs and round holes, with our players at the minute, in terms of how they're coming in, and especially with like what games they're being deployed for, and when we pick up injuries and suspensions and things like that, it doesn't help us. But I think we can all probably agree that we feel a lot more resolute and a lot more comfortable in this shape. But I suppose, and I'm sure David Gray and the coaching staff know this, it's just that when we start to play this shape more consistently, teams will start to look at, right, where can we hurt them? And I do think our kind of right-hand side, and I suppose to a certain extent our left-hand side with maybe Nicky Cadden in there, those little spaces in between the wing-backs and the right and left centre-halves are the big areas to watch out for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you wanted to talk a bit about how Hibs pressed in the game. Was that something you were particularly impressed by on this occasion?
Yeah, I thought I really liked how we looked out to attack the game. Obviously, in those last clips there, we're talking, Aberdeen moving the ball a bit, and it's slightly different in that you can't, in terms of your press, there's moments, especially when the ball's in near your goal, that you're thinking, well, actually, we're just going to drop into a sort of deeper shape and just try and look to counter attack. But certainly from goal kicks and when Aberdeen had set pieces, we were constantly at them. And I think the plan was, one, to turn the ball over, of course, but two, to force them long.
Yeah.
Because I think if they went long, I think Rocky could deal with anything with Sockler. Really didn't really give him too much trouble. And especially with the elements as well. So yeah, like this is just an example. Early on, you can see that the balls came out from the goalkeeper. It's getting worked out to the right back. Ellie's pressing in there. Josh Campbell's going to cross in towards Nielsen, who's dropping to try and get into position. If you go into the next clip again, you can see as it goes out to Nicky Devlin here, straight away Nicky Cadden's right on him. Newell's up there with Shinnie. Campbell's there with Nielsen. Boyle's across. Yuan's across to stop the ball getting put back. So I really like that. And we pretty much did that most of the first half, really, when Aberdeen were looking to play out. And then I think when they were going long, we were kind of happy to battle them in the middle of the pitch because we're quite a small team. But Rocky's obviously got great height, great strength, great power in the air. Campbell, we touched on last night about his ability in the air as well. Defensively, Triantis is quite so. We do have a lot of people in the middle of the park that can go and challenge and win the ball, and I think that's kind of played a real part. And there was loads of these clips. If you go into the next one, again, this is sort of Aberdeen. The ball, we've got ourselves into a good shape. We're working it back, and you can just see there's just a real intensity from everyone, all moving in the right direction, all moving at the right time. It's not just one person chasing the ball down and the others looking around and not going and making it easy to play through us, which has happened, early on in the season. I remember us speaking before about just some players pressing, some not, and everything just looking disjointed. But I just thought we looked so in sync on Saturday. And if you go on to the next part, the ball works back to the keeper. Again, Yuan sort of keeping him, he's the one that's done the pressing, so he's kind of resting now, but just making sure the ball's not going to go out to the centre-back. Boyle sprints forward and he curves his run to stop coming out the other side. Campbell sprints in to make sure there's not that easy bounce pass from Nielsen out to Rubicic on that side as well. And I think Duan in this clip just thumps it long. Rocky outmuscles Sockler, and Iredale pops it back to Smith. And it's just that, it's a bit cliched about, defending from the front, but I thought that front three in particular were phenomenal at that on Saturday. If you go into the next clip, even just like later parts of the game, just another example, just in the first half, we've got the goal. This is the setup from the free kick, and you can see there's your front three, Yuan, Campbell, Boyle. This is Triantis and Newell as well, pushing up. And the back three are just sort of behind them, pushed up as well. And you can see here Aberdeen like to play, so Nielsen goes into Shinnie, and it goes back. And if you look into the next clip, straight away as the ball's going, we're on it. Campbell's closing down, Boyle's closing down. The next clip, Boyle putting the most pressure on, and Aberdeen work the ball wide. But if you see in this next part, Chris Cadden is also pushed forward in this next clip as well, and he's on Mackenzie as well. So you can just see there, like that, the way we're shaped there, and you look at all the players across the pitch, it's like a good position to be in. And it just means there, if Cadden gets close enough here, or we force a poor pass inside, you've got Triantis who can nick it, and then suddenly, that shape, you can imagine Eli Yuan running into that big space, Boyle peeling down that sort of right-hand side. And I just thought all through the game, we did that really well.
Yeah, I think what's kind of stands out about a lot of these clips is like there's no kind of obvious way for Aberdeen to go to get out, really, other than, as you said, what they ended up doing at times was knocking it long. There's no kind of obvious way for them to go in a lot of these stills, which I think is what that must be pleasing for David Gray with it, because when you that's essentially when you press that is what the situation you want to create, where there's nowhere for the opposition to go really, except where you want them to go, which I think, as you touched on, with Hibs, was they're quite happy for Aberdeen to go long.
Yeah, and I actually think this one they end up getting in behind, but I think it just comes from the ball goes to Rocky, and I think he, instead of just knocking out the park, which he normally
Yeah.
does, he tries to play forward, and I think it ricochets off an
Ah,
Aberdeen
right.
player and they attack in behind. But yeah, the setup's perfect, and you're right, that's exactly what they would have wanted, and it just sort of snuffed Aberdeen out a little bit, and then especially when we were then going down the other end and attacking with real intensity, it made a massive difference. But going on to the next clip, what impressed me a lot is if you look at the time, 62 minutes. Obviously, we've scored the second goal in the first half. We've got that early goal in the second half. Kwon's come on now because Newell's went off injured, and I think what was great about him is it didn't change anything. And quite often when we've made subs, we've spoke about a lot how sometimes the subs have killed us. I've got to be honest. Like, at times as we've made subs, we've weakened the team and we've looked disjointed, and that's probably contributed to some of the ending of the game. But
Yeah.
here, Kwon comes on. You can see he's pushed up. He's the closest to us on the screen there, beside Shinnie. And again, another wee note from Martin Boyle, like, still pressing. Johan's positioning's good. He's not letting it go into Devlin, but he's ready to press when it goes back. So it was just good to see those players still doing that and coming on and into the game and still contributing in that way. I think if you go into the next part, this probably moves into it's still, I suppose, a little bit about press, but I wanted to highlight Kwon here and just this little bit about grit and determination, because at this point Aberdeen have sort of thrown the kitchen sink, at us. They've put Morris on, Ambrose is on, Polvara's on. They've just they really, really went for it. Duke's on that other side as well. They've still got McGrath on the pitch. And not only have I criticised Triantis quite a lot, I've also criticised Kwon quite a lot for not tracking runners. But in this example here, and we've seen this at the home game as well, Morris has taken Nicky Cadden on 1v1. We know what he's going to do. He's going to go down the byline. If you go into the next clip, you can see Kwon just highlighted there. But he's sprinting back. He keeps going. And as we go into that final couple of clips here, he doesn't make the tackle here, but he's close enough that he sort of applies a little bit of pressure to Morris in that position. And then Morris kind of ends up taking like a really sort of big touch towards the byline, and that allows Nicky Cadden, who's done obviously brilliant. I'm not taking anything away from Nicky Cadden in that moment, but to get back and just make a fantastic tackle that ends up being a goal kick. And that's the one he sort of turns to the fans and celebrates like he scored a goal. So it's just, I think it was worth highlighting because we've just not had that this season.
Yeah.
And, Kwon and Triantis and Newell and some of the other players, we've just not done these basics like tracking back and running ourselves into the ground in the final parts of games. And, on the last night you asked me about, is it a turning point? I certainly think examples like this look to me like a turning point. That's players that look happy and look comfortable in what they're being asked to do and want to be there. And then I think in the final, so there's the tackle that elicits the big celebrations. And, obviously the headlines for Boyle will be all about the assists and the goal, and quite rightly so. But I just thought 92nd minute, 7 minutes added on. This is a loose pass in the middle of the park from Aberdeen. And just look at the intensity here. The ball goes across. He goes in for a sort of 50-50 and he goes well into it. He actually wins it because the ball sort of comes loose and goes to the other side of the pitch. And then if you go to the next clip, he still keeps going.
Yeah.
He's still going. He goes all the way across. And in that final clip, he gets across Mackenzie. And then they get into a bit of a tussle and fall over, and we get a little bit of handbags and we waste a bit more time. And I think it's just another, Boyle's not played a lot this season. He's been under a lot of criticism. People have written him off. I've probably written him off, to be honest, a couple of times as well. But a game like that, to be doing that in the 92nd minute on the back of a really tough game out of possession, at that point, a lot of demand on you when we win the ball back to go forward. And obviously on the back of 2 assists and a goal as well, it just... I probably celebrated those last 2 moments more than the goals. just seeing these guys work for each other out of possession, and it just stands us in really good stead going forward.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of a different feeling around this team now to a few weeks ago, isn't there? Like, you want to talk, is it a definitively a corner being turned? But I think you can say quite definitively that the feeling is a wee bit different now, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think, and I think the consistency of just being able to, with Smith and goals, we've sort of stuck with him, and that's given us some consistency. He didn't have a huge amount to do. He did. I think I'm going to give him benefit of the doubt that he nearly got caught out from a ball, from a cross that he did really well to tip over the bar. It looked like the wind kind of caught it, but he's very comfortable catching and just doing the basics and going forward. We know he's just going to sort of put it long when he needs to. And then I think just being able to keep that a settled back three and that settled four in front of them, maybe you're just taking out Chris Cadden for Miller at times. And, obviously Obita came on at the weekend as well, but obviously Nicky Cadden in that role, I do think that helps a lot. Just and then obviously if you're a player coming off the bench now, it's quite straightforward what you're going into. We're not changing shape, and we're not changing things. And in the front part of the pitch, you don't mind changing the sort of hat when you're attacking. If it's a particular game, you might want Hoylett, Yuan, and Gale for a home game when you're looking like at Ross County, for example. But away to maybe Hearts, certainly to Rangers, Celtic, you maybe want Boyle, Yuan, and Campbell for their energy and things like that. So I think Gray seems to be getting, starting to pick players for the right moments and getting the best out of them in those situations, which I do think has been a corner turned. And obviously with hopefully Kurevich coming back and Bowie to come back after that, it just gives us more options. And, I would imagine we do some business in January as well. And if we've now got that set up and that's kind of locked in, we can start recruiting players for that setup, and it just makes things just a bit more smooth from where we've been.
Aye, absolutely. So just one final question before we wrap it up. Edinburgh Derby on Boxing Day, how are you feeling?
Do you know, you always feel nervous about them, really, and you just knew that they were going to get a result in the weekend there. From what we discussed about how Hibs can be kind of hurt in terms of like with those spaces in between the midfield and the wing backs, that's where Hearts do have a decent strength with Spittle and Penrice and things like that, and over that side of the pitch. However, I do think certainly the way we played against Aberdeen, and that kind of lineup and the setup that we had, I could imagine that standing us in pretty good stead away at Tynecastle. I would imagine, injury dependent, we would set up very, very similar. I would think, because I would imagine that Gray would be saying, well, listen, they are going to get a lot of the ball, or that's what they're going to want to do, and we can hurt them on the counter attack. Hearts, similar to Aberdeen, like to push their fullbacks high. Penrice has become a really important player for them, gets high up the pitch, and that space in behind him is probably a really key area, and the same on the other side as well. So I can imagine it being quite a stuffy game, as they usually are. But
it's always a safe bet, that, isn't it?
Yeah, but to be honest, I think that performance against Aberdeen, that's the kind of performance you want away from home going into a derby match. Because, if you could replicate that, we're laughing and celebrating.
There we go, folks. We're going to leave it there for today. Thanks, as always, for joining us. Thanks to Craig for joining us as well. As I said at the top of the show, part one of our match breakdown, or match debrief, match review, whatever you want to call it, is on our YouTube channel. So do check that out. As I said in the previous show as well, we have now passed 1,000 YouTube subscribers. So thank you to everybody who has joined us. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do consider. It helps us keep growing the channel. We can bring you more content, and it also means you get notified every time we go live. So yeah, folks, I want you to have a great Christmas, and we'll catch you on Boxing Day for the Edinburgh Derby. Speak to you again soon. Cheers.